Police are involved in a shooting in Wisconsin. Liberals freak out over an apple tree. The big takeaway from the DNC last week, and coverage from night one of the Republican National Convention. All that and more on this episode of The Johnny Ray Show. Thank you, and welcome back to the Johnny Ray Show. Kenosha, Wisconsin police officers were involved in a shooting of a man on Sunday night. The man did survive and was treated at the local hospital and has made it successfully through surgery. More on that in just a moment, but first. At about 5 p.m. on Sunday, Kenosha Police Department was radioed to a domestic violence incident involving one Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake was apparently in an altercation involving two women, and when police tried to address the violence, Blake became aggressive with the officers. Sources have said he advised the officers he had a gun in his car while wielding a knife. The officers reported deploying their tasers, which malfunctioned. The officer drew their firearm as Blake walked away from them, opening his vehicle door and reached into the driver's side floorboard. One officer grabbed Blake's shirt, attempting to pull him out of the vehicle away from whatever he may have been reaching for. When that failed, the officer fired 7 times toward his back. Blake had his 3 children in the car at the time. The officers performed medical aid until EMS arrived and took Blake to the local hospital. Now, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I've never been one to care much about popularity over factual evidence. I've seen a lot of comments on this story. Is it tragic? Yes. Nobody's denying that. No child should have to see their father or any family member shot or hurt. But few questions arise in my head while reading this. 1. Why was Blake out of the car away from his small children to begin with? I don't know, because those facts have not been presented. 2. Why was Blake being so resistive knowing his children were in the car? Again, I don't know. And C. What would lead the officers to have such an aggressive stance with Blake over, say, another individual? Now that I can answer, and I'll tell you why. The criminal record of Jacob Blake reads like a who's who of charges, from multiple counts of domestic violence, to assault on police officers, to sexual violence. As a police officer, when you go into a call of any violence, you have a guard up. It's like second nature. But when you go into a situation with a man who has a pattern of aggressive, violent behavior, you up that guard a lot. Now, couple that with the fact that this man already had violent past and was also wanted for sexual violence and assault currently, meaning he had an active warrant out for his arrest. That mixture most generally ends in a bad day for a lot of people. Of course, the left used this to continue the riots and burning down of the country, but does anyone stop to think everyone, literally every single one of their quote-unquote innocent victims have been proven to be not innocent at all? Yet they riot, loot, and burn cities for justice. When an actual innocent person is killed, they made excuses as to why his life didn't matter, such is the case with Cannon Hinton and David Dorn. Does anyone see this? No? Nobody? Not at all? Didn't think so, really, to be honest. Now, First Lady Melania Trump is the next focal point of the crazy liberals, as she is being lambasted by CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of the radical loonies for gardening. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, guys. The left is mad because she redesigned just a little bit, in the Rose Garden outside the White House. And the left is angry. Basically, what she did was she uprooted and moved the crabapple trees planted by, I think it was Jackie Kennedy, to a greenhouse, still on the White House, still on the land, to be transplanted to another area of the humongous, massive White House grounds. And then she arranged to make the garden wheelchair accessible, which until now it's not been. I know, that mean old Melania caring about handicapped folks. I know, it's horrible. It's ridiculous. The left have gone so far to the left, they're falling off the paper now. I swear. So, just to show how crazy they are, and how simple moving some trees really is, I'm going to go through a list of some crazy additions that past presidents have made to the White House and surrounding area. Okay? Thomas Jefferson, he put in a wilderness museum. A freaking museum. Okay? He put a whole museum of animals in the White House. Teddy Roosevelt put a tennis court. He also had stuffed animal heads lining the walls of the dining room. That's a little bit more than a tree. FDR added a swimming pool inside the White House. Not one outside, no. Inside the White House. Tricky Dick Nixon added a bowling alley. And the Golden Boy Obama, he put in a $10 million basketball court. So, I doubt very heavily that removing a tree from the Rose Garden is that big of a deal, folks. Calm it on down, okay? It's not like she painted the place black like supporters of Obama said he should do. And on to the DNC last week, where the big theme was Trump bad, Trump racist, mail-in voting is the key. The mostly virtual convention was pretty mundane in most people's opinion, but it proved to be somewhat indicative of the left's thought process going into November. This week, the RNC is up to respond, and we'll see if they return fire at all the anti-Trump Fruit Loops, or if they stick to the stats and facts. Undoubtedly, if they stick to the facts, it should prove to swing the moderate votes to the Republican side, because a lot of moderates, the middle riders, showed a real distaste for the DNC last week. I went over the major speeches of the DNC, but one I didn't go over was Hillary's speech, and that's honestly just because I don't think I could fit all of her lies being fact-checked in one regular episode. I just don't think that's going to happen. I'm not going to play it, because to be honest, I'd probably lose more listeners than I'd gain by playing it. But I will say she took the cake for the most lies in the shortest span of time. And her speech was like 4.5 or 5 minutes, I think. And she told more lies than emails that she lost. If that tells you anything. And on to why you're all here. The RNC kicked off tonight. The convention started off with a roll call, which is a great thing. But what really shined was Donald Trump's opening speech. He took some jabs, he was a classic Trump, but he set the tone of the RNC by not bashing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but by talking about what got him elected 4 years ago, and what he'll do in the coming 4 years. If he stays on track, I've always said there are 3 sides to Donald Trump. There's the good, the bad, and the Trump. Okay? The good was his speech at roll call tonight. He stuck to the theme. He was professional for the most part. He stayed the course. The bad Trump is when he rants on stage for 30, 45 minutes about the media and his opponents and those that oppose him. Like, it's one thing to mention it, but it's quite another to rant for 30 or 45 minutes. And then, of course, the Trump is when he tweets his colorful little tweets about getting the libs all riled up. If he stays the course with this good Trump that he's got going on, he'll landslide November. Okay? That I'm predicting that. If he sways into the bad Trump or even the Trump too much, it will hurt him. So I think if he stays the course that he started tonight, I think he'll end off on top. So the first night of this 4-night event was themed Land of Heroes. Each night has its own theme, land of something. They got Land of Heroes, Land of Opportunities, so on and so forth. And it had a lot of great speeches. The first speech, kicking it off, was Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA.
Good evening. It is an honor to be with you tonight. My name is Charlie Kirk. I run the largest pro-American student organization in the country, Turning Point USA, fighting for the future of our republic. Speaking to you in my personal capacity tonight as a 26-year-old, I see the angst of young people as well as the challenges facing new parents. I am here tonight to tell you, to warn you, that this election is a decision between preserving America as we know it and eliminating everything that we love. For decades, ruling class leaders in both parties sold out our future to China, to faceless corporations, and to self-serving lobbyists. They did it to preserve their own power and enrich themselves, all while rigging the system to hold down the good, decent middle-class patriots striving to build a family and pursue a decent life. All of this changed dramatically in 2015, when a billionaire named Donald Trump put his own life of luxury on the line. From that moment he came down that famous escalator, he started a movement to reclaim our government from the rotten cartel of insiders that have been destroying our country. We may not have realized it at the time, but Trump is the bodyguard of Western civilization. Trump was elected to protect our families from the vengeful mob that seeks to destroy our way of life, our neighborhoods, schools, churches, and values. President Trump was elected to defend the American way of life. The American way of life means you follow the law, you work hard, you honor God, you raise your kids with strong values, and you work to create a civil society. The American way of life means you speak your mind without retribution, without being kicked off social media by a self-righteous censor in Silicon Valley. It means you can freely practice your religion, and that church is more essential than a casino. And it means that we judge people on their actions, not on their immutable characteristics. The American way of life is being dismantled by a group of bitter, deceitful, vengeful activists who have never built anything in their lives. They have us locking up pastors while releasing violent criminals from prison. We are kicking doctors off of social media, yet promoting Chinese state-funded propaganda on major tech platforms. This election is the most critical since 1860, when a man named Lincoln was elected to preserve the Union from disintegration. This election is not just the most important of our lifetime, it is the most important since the preservation of the Republic in 1865. By re-electing Trump, we will ensure that our kids are raised to love our country and respect its founding fathers, not taught to hate or be ashamed of them. We will build monuments to heroes, not burn down our cities. We will be a country that rises to higher heights, that dreams big, thinks big, and achieves the impossible. A country that values our remarkable journey, the complexities of our past, but clearly communicates to the next generation that we have to be grateful, not angry, that we live in the United States. We will be a country that makes it easier to have many children, live quiet and peaceable lives, and worship your God without a tyrant getting in the way. We will be a country that has its best 100 years ahead. We will build a future where America remains the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. All of that is within our grasp if we secure 4 more years for the defender of Western civilization, our champion, my friend, the 45th President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump.
Charlie Kirk is an amazing young speaker. He's been an avid conservative speaker since Trump has been in office. He didn't punch down at the Dems too much. He did take a few shots. He spoke about Trump and the good he has done. The mainstream media, the MSM, won't show you the good parts. They refuse to. It goes against the narrative. He did. He showed the highlights of the good side of Trump. He did mention the censoring of conservatives by the big tech. That was a great part. And I think this was the best speaker that they could have had to kick the speakers off with. He's an amazing young speaker. He's straight to the point. He's very knowledgeable. He's very professional. He very rarely gets out of character, if you will. The next speaker is one of my favorites. I can never get enough. Representative Matt Gaetz. Take a listen.
I'm Congressman Matt Gaetz. I'm speaking to you from an auditorium emptier than Joe Biden's daily schedule. But we are a nation of full hearts and clear minds. We see the choice clearly: strength or weakness, energy or confusion, success or failure. President Trump is the first president since Reagan not to start a new war. Biden has foolishly cheerled decades of war without winning, without end. President Trump knows we are strongest when we fight hardest, not in distant deserts, but for our fellow Americans. We must fight to save America now, or we may lose her forever. Joe Biden might not even notice. Settle for Biden. That's the hashtag promoted by AOC and the socialists. The Woketopians will settle for Biden because they will make him an extra in a movie written, produced, and directed by others. It's a horror film, really. They'll disarm you, empty the prisons, lock you in your home, and invite MS-13 to live next door. And the police aren't coming when you call. In Democrat-run cities, they're already being defunded, disbanded. Blaming our best and allowing society's worst, that's the story they write in Hollywood. That's if the lights even stay on in California anymore. A state that cannot keep power running for its own people should not send its junior senator to be vice president. They used to write only in fiction, but nightmares are becoming real. Cops killed, children shot. At the Democrat convention, they say, if you vote against Trump, it will all stop. Appeasement is never a winning strategy. No, we won't settle for violence in our neighborhoods or at our border. We won't settle for decades of bad decisions by basement-dwelling Joe Biden. We settle a continent. We know that the frontier, the horizon, even the stars belong to us. Donald Trump, like all builders, is a visionary. That which is built in the mind is even more powerful than the brick and mortar that holds it together. First comes the mind, then the making. First comes the vision, then the work. Washington, Lincoln, and Jefferson are immortal precisely because of the pull they have on our imagination. You cannot cancel a culture that loves its heroes. The dangerous left need America to be weaker to accomplish their goal of replacing her. We know that to make America great again, we must first make something of ourselves. That is the meaning of true strength. My great-grandfather was a railroad man. As a Florida man, I watch our rockets routinely send the brightest beyond the heavens with our flag and our hope. America is the greatest country that has ever existed. Don't let any celebrity, athlete, or politician tell you otherwise. President Trump sometimes raises his voice and a ruckus. He knows that's what it takes to raise an army of patriots who love America and will protect her. We must win this election if we cherish our country as much as we should, for there is no place to run, no refuge for freedom should we fail. America is not just an idea or a constitution. It is our home. We must protect our home with unbreakable made in America strength. Strength I see every day in President Donald Trump. Thank you.
You can always depend on Representative Matt Gaetz to take the hard shots at Democrats. He promoted the new hashtag Settle for Biden. I think that was great. That was beautiful. It was good to get that out of the way. That I hope that they don't continue to punch down at the Democrats, but if they're going to pick somebody to punch down at the Democrats, Matt Gaetz, best one they could have picked. All the punches aside, though, he made a lot of valid points of how Democrats want illegals and criminals to go ahead of legal American citizens. He pushed that fact, and it's very difficult for anybody to argue against that because it's true. They've said it. They've taken the mask off. They've been talking about it for years now at this point. They've been pushing for undocumented illegal aliens getting free healthcare, free college. I mean, you might as well just give them free money in general at this point. They're wanting illegal immigrants to vote. They're wanting illegal immigrants to get let out of prison for crimes that they committed here, as well as the crime of coming here illegally. I mean, there's no debating the fact that they want illegals and criminals to be placed above the legal American citizens that are here. Okay, next up was Kimberly Klacik, who, I think that's how you say her last name, Klacik, I believe, who's a Republican running for Congress in Baltimore. And she made a lot of waves with her new campaign videos that she's been pushing out there. And a lot of people have taken notice to this. Here's what she had to say.
My name is Kim Klacik, and I'm running for Congress in Maryland's 7th District. And like Shirley Chisholm, I'm unbought and unbossed. Let me remind you, the Democrats have controlled this part of Baltimore City for over 50 years. And they have run this beautiful place right into the ground. Abandoned buildings, liquor stores on every corner, drug addicts, guns on the street. That's now the norm in many neighborhoods. You'd think Maryland taxpayers would be getting a whole lot since our taxes are out of control. Instead, we're paying for decades of incompetence and corruption. Sadly, the same cycle of decay exists in many of America's Democrat-run cities. And yet the Democrats still assume that black people will vote for them, no matter how much they let us down and take us for granted. We're sick of it. We're not going to take it anymore. The days of blindly supporting the Democrats are coming to an end. In Baltimore, we have the highest number of black Republicans in the entire country running for office this election cycle. Joe Biden believes we can't think for ourselves, that the color of someone's skin dictates their political views. We're not buying the lies anymore. You and your party have neglected us for far too long. We want safety in our neighborhoods. We want to make the most of the federal opportunity zone I'm standing in right now in West Baltimore. We want higher paying jobs and more business opportunities. We want lower taxes. We want school choice. We want a chance to get ahead, not just get by. That's what President Trump promised, and that's what President Trump delivered. I want Baltimore to be an example to Republicans around the country that we can compete in our inner cities if we reach out to the citizens and deliver real results. President Trump is bringing this country back roaring. He's bringing the American spirit to life for all Americans. So I'm asking you to help President Trump complete this great American comeback. And then I'm asking you to help me start this great Baltimore comeback. Thank you, and God bless America.
Her speech was more of a campaign speech, but it does go to point out that fallacy that Democrats can run a country by showing they can't even run a district in a city. Next up was Ronna McDaniel, who's the chairperson of the RNC. Skip! Next we'll go to Jim Jordan, and boy oh boy, if you thought Gaetz was savage, just take a listen to Jim Jordan. He ain't got the jokes, but he's got the facts. Take a listen.
Good evening. I'm Congressman Jim Jordan, representing the 4th District of Ohio. The Republican Party is the pro-America party. President Trump is the pro-America candidate. This election is about who can preserve the values, principles, and institutions that make America great. Don't believe me? Look at what's happening in American cities. Cities all run by Democrats. Crime, violence, and mob rule. Democrats refuse to denounce the mob, and their response to the chaos? Defund the police, defund Border Patrol, and defund our military. And while they're doing all this, they're also trying to take away your guns. Look at the positions they've taken in the past few months. Democrats won't let you go to church, but they'll let you protest. Democrats won't let you go to work, but they'll let you riot. And Democrats won't let you go to school, but they'll let you go loot. President Trump has fought against each of their crazy ideas. He's taken on the swamp, all of the swamp, the Democrats, the press, and the never-Trumpers. And when you take on the swamp fights back. They tried the Russia hoax, the Mueller investigation, and the fake impeachment. But in spite of this unbelievable opposition, this president has done what he said he would do. Taxes cut, regulations reduced, economy growing, lowest unemployment in 50 years, out of the Iran deal, embassy in Jerusalem, hostages home from North Korea, a new USMCA agreement, and of course he's building the wall and rebuilding our economy as we speak. I love the president's intensity and his willingness to fight every day in Washington for our families. But what I also appreciate about the president is something most Americans never get to see, how much he truly cares about people. Our family has seen it. 2 years ago, our nephew Eli was killed in a car accident. He lived a mile up the road from us, grew up wrestling and training with our boys, was a high school state champion, varsity athlete for the University of Wisconsin. It was a Saturday morning, 3 days after the accident. I walked to the car to head up to Eli's parents' home when the president called. We talked about a few issues, and then he asked how the family was doing. I said, "They're doing okay, Mr. President, but it's tough." The president said, "Yeah, losing a loved one is always difficult, and it's really tough when they're so young." I then said, "Mr. President, I'm actually walking into their house right now. Obviously, they don't know that I'm talking to you, but if you'd be willing to say hello to Eli's dad, you'd make a terrible day a little less terrible." "What's his name?" the president asked. I walked through the door and said, "Todd, the president wants to talk to you." For the next 5 minutes, family and friends sat in complete silence as the president of the United States took time to talk to a dad who was hurting. That's the president I've gotten to know the last 4 years. The president who shared private moments like this with soldiers, victims of violent crime, and people who've had businesses destroyed by the mob. That's the individual who's made America great again, and who knows America's best days are still in front of us. And that's why I'm busting my tail to help him get reelected. I'm asking you to do the same. Thank you, and God bless our country.
You know, Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz are quickly becoming the Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. No. The Tango and Cash of Congress, okay? Gaetz has the jokes, and Jordan has the hard-hitting facts. You just can't argue with those two. Well, liberals will try and fail miserably. He also shared a personal story showing the compassion of President Trump. That's something that the left has strictly ran against. They've had the false attacks for 4 years now that he's a heartless and callous individual that just doesn't care about anybody else. Another person that pointed out something like this was who's up next, which is Herschel Walker. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I'm not an actor, a singer, or a politician. I'm Herschel Walker. Most of you know me as a football player, but I'm also a father, a man of faith, and a very good judge of character. I've known Donald Trump for 37 years, and I don't mean just casual ran into him from time to time. I'm talking about a deep personal friendship. I watched him as an owner of a professional football team. Right after he bought the team, he set out to learn. He learned about the history of the team, the players, the coaches, every detail. Then he used what he learned to make the team better. I watched him in the boardroom. He can be in the middle of a big meeting, but if one of the kids was on the phone, he dropped everything to take the call. He taught me that the family should be your top priority. I watched him treat janitors, security guards, and waiters the same way he would treat a VIP. He made them feel special because he knew they were. He understands that they are the people who make this country run. They clean, they cook, they build, they drive, they deliver. He told me, "Herschel, make an effort to get to know people. Remember their names." That stuck with me. One time, I planned to take his kids to Disney World with my family. At the last minute, Donald said he'd like to join us. So there he was, in a business suit, on It's a Small World ride. That was something to see. It just shows you what a caring, loving father he is. It hurt my soul to hear the terrible names that people call Donald. The worst one is racist. I take it as a personal insult that people would think I've had a 37-year friendship with a racist. People who think that don't know what they're talking about. Growing up in the Deep South, I've seen racism up close. I know what it is, and it isn't Donald Trump. Just because someone loves and respects the flag, our national anthem, and our country, doesn't mean they don't care about social justice. I care about all those things. So does Donald Trump. He shows how much he cares about social justice in the black community through his actions. And his action speaks louder than stickers or slogans on a jersey. He keeps right on fighting to improve the lives of black Americans and all Americans. He works night and day. He never stops. He leaves nothing on the field. Some people don't like his style, the way he knocks down obstacles that get in the way of his goals. People on the opposing team didn't like when I ran over them either. But that's how you get the job done. I pray every night that God gives him more time. Give him 4 more years. He has accomplished so much almost all by himself on a constant attack. But there's still more work to be done. If you love America and want to make it better, Donald Trump is your president. He's my president, and I'm blessed to call him friend.
You know, I think this was the best speech of the night, simply because this wasn't a man bashing the left. He was simply telling his personal relationship with President Trump as a human being. Simply beautiful. It was great. It was amazing. Next up was Andrew Pollack, father of Meadow Pollack, a little girl who was killed in the heinous shooting at Parkland High School a few years back. Take a listen to what he had to say.
In 2018, a gunman walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and changed my life forever. My name is Andrew Pollack. His name isn't worth saying. One of the seniors walking in the hallways that day was my beautiful daughter, Meadow. She was just months away from graduating and beginning a new life. We were so proud of the woman she had become. But in the hallway on that 3rd floor, the gunman saw Meadow and shot her down the hallway, hitting her 4 times. After she was shot and on the floor, she crawled over to another student, a freshman girl, to protect her. She draped her body over her, and then the scumbag gunman shot my daughter at point-blank range 5 more times, killing Meadow and the girl she was shielding. She had a whole life ahead of her, and in that life, she could have done anything and been anything. So many moments that I waited so long for were taken from me. I didn't get to drop her off at college. I didn't get to walk her down the aisle. But every moment was taken from her, and for what? I never wanted this to become a political spectacle, but it did. I never wanted to meet the president like this, but I did. I was invited to the White House. The truth is, I had just buried my daughter that week. I really wasn't interested in public events like a tour or a photo op. I was interested in answers and solutions. So if the president wanted to meet me personally, I said I'd go. They said, of course, that was his plan. At the White House, my family and I sat with the president in the Oval Office and told him about Meadow. I told him what we knew. I told him that his administration needed to take a closer look at what went wrong and why. And I got to see who President Trump really is. He's a good man and a great listener, and he cuts through the BS. Then the president did what he said he would do. He took action. He formed a school safety commission that issued dozens of recommendations to make schools safer. But I'll bet you never heard about that. Instead, the media turned my daughter's murder into a coordinated attack on President Trump, Republicans, and our Second Amendment. In fact, when President Trump asked me and other parents of children that were murdered in school shootings to join him as he announced the commission's findings, the media's first question wasn't about protecting kids. Shockingly, they asked about the government shutdown. President Trump turned to me appalled and said, "Andy, can you believe these people? We're trying to talk about school safety, and this is what they do." But I could believe it. After my daughter's murder, the media didn't seem interested in the facts. so I found them myself. I learned that gun control laws didn't fail my daughter. People did. The gunman had threatened to kill his classmates before. He had threatened to rape them. He had threatened to shoot up the school. Every red flag you could imagine. But the school didn't just miss these red flags. They knowingly ignored them. Far-left Democrats in our school district made this shooting possible because they implemented something they called restorative justice. This policy, which really just blames teachers for students' failures, puts kids and teachers at risk and makes shootings more likely. But it was billed as a pioneering approach to discipline and safety. I was just fine with the old approach to discipline and safety. It was called discipline and safety. But the Obama-Biden administration took Parkland's bad policies and forced them into schools across America. When President Trump rescinded Obama's guidance on restorative justice policies, he put an end to that. And that meant the world to me. It's hard to tell how much Mr. Biden understands about what happened at Parkland. Mr. Biden has campaigned on bringing back restorative justice as part of his unity platform with Bernie Sanders and has pledged to implement it in school districts across America. But he doesn't even seem to know when the shooting happened. He said that he was vice president when it happened, but he wasn't. Mr. Biden may not know when my daughter was murdered, but I do. February 14, 2018. Mr. Biden may not know that these policies make shootings more likely, but I do. Mr. Biden may not know who was vice president that day, but I do. It wasn't Joe Biden. It was Mike Pence. Thank God. And I know who the president was, too. It wasn't Barack Obama. It was President Donald J. Trump, and he took action. I truly believe the safety of our kids depends on whether this man is reelected. I hope you'll join me in helping to make that happen. Mr. President, myself and millions of Americans appreciate you and love you. God bless America, and God bless our president, Donald J. Trump. Thank you.
Wow. That story is just, it's heartbreaking. Simply heartbreaking. But this shows everyone the true side of President Trump, the stuff the media doesn't show. It keeps in line with that. That's been the running theme of tonight. It goes to show you the side that the mainstream media won't show you, like when he formed the School Safety Commission. I challenge any listener to go back and show a CNN or an MSNBC headline mentioning that. You can't, because it doesn't exist. The left are so tunnel-focused on the false narrative that he's a bad president. They don't show anything good. They can't, because it would undercut their position. And it's sad, but we have come to the realization of this over the last 4 years. We've just come to accept it. And that's the sad thing about America in 2020. Next up was Mark and Patricia McCloskey, the St. Louis couple that came to notoriety for simply defending their home during a riot by the BLM mob. Take a listen.
Good evening, America. We are Mark and Patty McCloskey. We're speaking to you tonight from St. Louis, Missouri, where just weeks ago you may have seen us defending our home as a mob of protesters descended on our neighborhood.
America is such a great country that not only do you have the right to own a gun and use it to defend yourself, but thousands of Americans will offer you free advice on how to use it. At least that's what we experienced. What you saw happen to us could just as easily happen to any of you who are watching from quiet neighborhoods around our country. And that's what we want to speak to you about tonight.
That's exactly right. Whether it's the defunding of police, ending cash bail so criminals can be released back out on the streets the same day to riot again, or encouraging anarchy and chaos on our streets, it seems as if the Democrats no longer view the government's job as protecting honest citizens from criminals, but rather protecting criminals from honest citizens. Not a single person in the out-of-control mob you saw at our house was charged with a crime. But you know who was? We were. They've actually charged us with felonies for daring to defend our home. On top of that, consider this. The Marxist liberal activist leading the mob to our neighborhood stood outside our home with a bullhorn screaming, "You can't stop the revolution." Just weeks later, that same Marxist activist won the Democrat nomination to hold a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. In the city of St. Louis, that's the same as winning the general election. That Marxist revolutionary is now going to be the Congresswoman from the 1st District of Missouri. These radicals are not content with marching in the streets. They want to walk the halls of Congress. They want to take over. They want power. This is Joe Biden's party. These are the people who will be in charge of your future and the future of your children.
They're not satisfied with spreading the chaos and violence into our communities. They want to abolish the suburbs altogether by ending single-family home zoning. This forced rezoning would bring crime, lawlessness, and low-quality apartments into now thriving suburban neighborhoods. President Trump smartly ended this government overreach, but Joe Biden wants to bring it back. These are the policies that are coming to a neighborhood near you. So make no mistake, no matter where you live, your family will not be safe in the radical Democrats' America.
At this moment in history, if you stand up for yourself and for the values our country was founded on, the mob, spurred on by their allies in the media, will try to destroy you. You've seen us on your TV screens and Twitter feeds. You know that we're not the kind of people who back down. Thankfully, neither is Donald Trump. President Trump will defend the God-given right of every American to protect their homes and their families. But more than that, Trump's vision for America is a country where you have an opportunity to work hard and build the life you dream of with a job you love, with your children being educated in great schools, in a community where your family can play in the backyard without fear, worship in a church without shame, and express your beliefs without retribution. Trump brought us the greatest economy our country had ever seen. The Democrats have brought us nothing but destruction.
When we don't have basic safety and security in our communities, we'll never be free to build a brighter future for ourselves, for our children, or for our country. That's what's at stake in this election, and that's why we must re-elect Donald Trump. God bless you, God bless the President,
and God bless these United States.
And this was such a great speech because it goes to push the focal point onto how radical the left mob has become, that a couple can't even defend their home from a riot without being charged with a felony for, mind you, legally doing what they're constitutionally allowed to do. It's crazy. It's nuts to think that they are charged with a felony for simply doing what the Constitution allows you to do and what their state and local government allow them to do. Next up was Kimberly Guilfoyle and Steve Scalise, but we'll save those for Friday's show. I want to get to the meat of the speeches, and first up was the ever-incomparable Don Jr. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Good evening, America. I'm Donald Trump Jr. We're here tonight to talk about the great American story, to talk about this country we all love, this land of promise and opportunity, of heroes and greatness. Just a few short months ago, we were seeing the American dream become a reality for more of our citizens than ever before. The greatest prolonged economic expansion in American history, the lowest unemployment rate in nearly 50 years, the lowest unemployment rates ever for Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, women, and pretty much every other demographic group. And then, courtesy of the Chinese Communist Party, the virus struck. The president quickly took action and shut down travel from China. Joe Biden and his Democrat allies called my father a racist and a xenophobe for doing it. They put political correctness ahead of the safety and security of the American people. Fortunately, As the virus began to spread, the president acted quickly and ensured ventilators got to hospitals that needed them most. He delivered PPE to our brave frontline workers, and he rallied the mighty American private sector to tackle this new challenge. There's more work to do, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Job gains are outpacing what the so-called experts expected. But Biden's radical left-wing policies would stop our economic recovery cold. He's already talking about shutting the country down again. It's madness. Democrats claim to be for workers, but they've spent the entire pandemic trying to sneak a tax break for millionaires in Democrat states into the COVID relief bill. Then they attacked my father for suspending the payroll tax for middle-class workers. In fact, if you think about it, Joe Biden's entire economic platform seems designed to crush the working man and woman. He supported the worst trade deals in the history of the planet. He voted for the NAFTA nightmare. Down the tubes went our auto industry. He pushed for TPP. Goodbye, manufacturing jobs. Beijing Biden is so weak on China that the intelligence community recently assessed that the Chinese Communist Party favors Biden. They know he'll weaken us both economically and on a world stage. Biden also wants to bring in more illegal immigrants to take jobs from American citizens. His open border policies would drive wages down for Americans at a time when low-income workers were getting real wage increases for the first time in modern history. He's pledged to repeal the Trump tax cuts, which were the biggest in our country. After 8 years of Obama and Biden's slow growth, Trump's policies have been like rocket fuel to the economy, and especially to the middle class. Biden has promised to take that money back out of your pocket and keep it in the swamp. That makes sense, though, considering Joe Biden is basically the Loch Ness Monster of the swamp. For the past half-century, he's been lurking around in there. He sticks his head up every now and then to run for president. Then he disappears and doesn't do much in between. So if you're looking for hope, look to the man who did what the failed Obama-Biden administration never could do and built the greatest economy our country has ever seen. And President Trump will do it again. We will be stronger than ever because when we put our mind to it, there is no obstacle that America can't surmount. Except there's a difference this time. In the past, both parties believed in the goodness of America. We agreed on where we wanted to go. We just disagreed on how to get there. This time, the other party is attacking the very principles on which our nation was founded. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the rule of law. Thomas Jefferson famously said, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." Our founders believed there was nothing more important than protecting our God-given right to think for ourselves. Now, the left, they're trying to cancel all of those founders. They don't seem to understand this important principle. In order to improve in the future, we must learn from our past, not erase it. So we're not going to tear down monuments and forget the people who built our great nation. Instead, we will learn from our past so we don't repeat any mistakes. And we will work tirelessly to improve the lives of all Americans. Joe Biden and the radical left are now coming for our freedom of speech. They want to bully us into submission. If they get their way, it will no longer be the silent majority. It will be the silenced majority. This has to stop. Freedom of expression used to be a liberal value, at least before the radical left took over. Now the Republican Party is the home of free speech, the place where anyone from any background can speak their mind, and may the best ideas win. People of faith are under attack. You're not allowed to go to church, but mass chaos in the streets gets a pass. It's almost like this election is shaping up to be church, work, and school versus rioting, looting, and vandalism. Or, in the words of Biden and the Democrats, peaceful protesting. Anarchists have been flooding our streets, and Democrat mayors are ordering the police to stand down. Small businesses across America, many of them minority-owned, are being torched by mobs. The Democrat mayors pretend it's not happening. They actually called it a summer of love. And that brings me to another important principle. Every American must be free to live without fear of violence in your country, in your communities, and in your homes. All men and women are created equal and must be treated equally under the law. That's why we must put an end to racism, and we must ensure that any police officer who abuses their powers is held accountable. What happened to George Floyd is a disgrace, and if you know a police officer, you know they agree with that too. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that our police are American heroes. They deserve our deepest appreciation. Because no matter what the Democrats say, you and I both know when we dial 911, we don't want it going to voicemail. So defunding the police is not an option. Everything starts with safety and security. You can't have anything else without it. You can't focus on building a better future for your children without the peace of mind that they can study safely in their classrooms, play safely in their neighborhoods, and sleep safely in their beds. But safety is only the beginning. Trump's America is a land of opportunity, a place of promise. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that could afford the best schools and the finest universities. But a great education cannot be the exclusive right of the rich and powerful. It must be accessible to all. And that's why my dad is pro-school choice. That's why he's called education access the civil rights issue, not just of our time, but of all time. It is unacceptable that too many African American and Hispanic American children are stuck in bad schools just because of their zip code. Donald Trump will not stand for it. If Democrats really wanted to help minorities and underserved communities, instead of bowing to big money union bosses, they'd let parents choose what school is best for their kids. They'd limit immigration to protect American workers. They'd support the police who protect our neighborhoods. They'd learn how to negotiate trade deals that prioritize America's interests for a change. They'd end the endless wars and quit sending our young people to solve problems in foreign lands. They'd cut taxes for families and workers. They'd create opportunity zones that drive investment into inner cities. In other words, if Democrats cared for the forgotten men and women of our country, they'd do exactly what President Trump is doing. America is the greatest country on earth, but my father's entire worldview revolves around the idea that we can always do even better. Imagine the life you want to have, one with a great job, a beautiful home, a perfect family. You can have it. Imagine the country you want to live in, one with true equal opportunity, where hard work pays off and justice is served with compassion and without partiality. You can have it. Imagine a world where the evils of communism and radical Islamic terrorism are not given a chance to spread, where heroes are celebrated and the good guys win. You can have it. That is the life. That is the country. That is the world that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are after. And yes, you can have it. Because unlike Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats, our party is open to everyone. It starts by rejecting radicals who want to drag us into the dark and embracing the man who represents a bright and beautiful future for all. It starts by re-electing Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. Thank you, and God bless America.
You know, I love how Don Jr. can mix punches with facts. He can do it with the best of them. He mentioned how Biden and the Democrats called President Trump a racist for placing a travel ban when the COVID outbreak started, while mentioning how Trump utilized the private sector to make masks and testing and all that, which ultimately was the best thing that could have been done at that time. He also pointed out the horrible policies that Slow Joe supports and passed over the 50 years he's been in office. It was just great stuff. He was the glue that brought everybody in. He holds that key to keep everybody intact here. And last but certainly not least, Tim Scott ended the night, and his speech was the best. Of all the professional speakers, they ended with the best. That's a given. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Good evening. I'm Senator Tim Scott from the great state of South Carolina. To all of you tuning in and participating in the political process, God bless you. This isn't how I picture tonight, but our country is experiencing something none of us envisioned. From a global pandemic to the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, 2020 has tested our nation in ways we haven't seen for decades. But regardless of the challenges presented to us, every 4 years, Americans come together to vote, to share stories of what makes our nation strong and the lessons we have learned that can strengthen it for further generations. Because while this election is between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, it is not solely about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It's about the promise of America. It's about you and me, our challenges and heartbreaks, hopes and dreams. It's about how we respond when tackling critical issues like police reform, when Democrats called our work a token effort and walked out of the room during negotiations because they wanted the issue more than they wanted a solution. Do we want a society that breeds success or a culture that cancels everything it even slightly disagrees with? I know where I stand because, you see, I am living my mother's American dream. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old, and we moved in with my grandparents into a 2-bedroom home with me, my mom, and my brother sharing a room and one bed. My mom worked 16 hours a day to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. She knew that if we could find the opportunity, bigger things would come. I thought I had to use football to succeed in life, and my focus on academics faded away. My freshman year, I failed out. I failed 4 subjects: Spanish, English, world geography, and even civics. Trust me, though, after 7 years in the Senate, I know I'm not the only one in Congress who failed civics. But even while I was failing the 9th grade, my mother always said to me, "Timmy, if you would just shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll be among the stars." She never lost faith in me, even when I lost faith in myself. Because of her encouragement, I went to summer school and caught up. The next year, I met my mentor, John Moniz, a Chick-fil-A operator. John saw something in me that I could not see in myself and started teaching me valuable life lessons. Like having a job would be a good thing, but creating jobs would be even better. That having an income could change my lifestyle, but creating a profit could change my community. He planted the seeds of what would become Opportunity Zones. This initiative that the president and I worked together on is now bringing more than $75 billion of private sector investment into distressed communities. I took those lessons to heart and started putting the pieces of my life back together. I realized a quality education is the closest thing to magic in America. That's why I fight to this day for school choice, to make sure every child in every neighborhood has a quality education. I don't care if it's a public, private, charter, virtual, or a homeschool. When a parent has a choice, their kid has a better chance. And the president has fought alongside me on that. Later in life, I started my own small business. That's why I know it is critical for us to have a tax code that encourages growth. We actually saw revenues to the Treasury increase after we lowered taxes in 2017. Rest assured, the Democrats do not want you to know that. After starting my small business and spending some time in local government, I decided to run for Congress in 2010. The district is based in Charleston, South Carolina, where the Civil War started, against a son of our legendary Senator, Strom Thurmond. You may be asking yourself, how does a poor black kid from a single-parent household run and win in a race crowded with Republicans against a Thurman because of the evolution of the Southern heart. In an overwhelmingly white district, the voters judged me not on the color of my skin, but on the content of my character. We live in a world that only wants you to believe in the bad news, racially, economically, and culturally polarizing news. The truth is, our nation's arc always bends back towards fairness. We are not fully where we want to be, but I thank God Almighty, we are not where we used to be. We are always striving to be better. When we stumble, and we will, we pick ourselves back up and try again. We don't give in to cancel culture or the radical and factually baseless belief that things are worse today than in the 1860s or the 1960s. We have work to do, but I believe in the goodness of America, the promise that all men and all women are created equal. And if you're watching tonight, I'm betting you do too. Over the past 4 years, we have made tremendous progress towards that promise. President Trump built the most inclusive economy ever. 7 million jobs created pre-COVID-19, and 2/3 of them went to women, African Americans, and Hispanics. The first new major effort to tackle poverty in a generation, opportunity zones. We put hard-earned tax dollars back in people's pockets by cutting their taxes, especially for single-parent households like the one I grew up in, cutting single mothers' taxes 70% on average. President Trump supported these tax cuts for those single moms and other working families and signed these policies into law, and our nation is better off for it. So, I'm going to ask you, the American people, not to simply look at what the candidates say, but to look back at what they've done. This election is about your future, and it is critical to paint a full picture of the records of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden said if a black man didn't vote for him, he wasn't truly black. Joe Biden said black people are a monolithic community. It was Joe Biden who said poor kids can be just as smart as white kids. And while his words are one thing, his actions take it to a whole new level. In 1994, Biden led the charge on a crime bill that put millions of black Americans behind bars. President Trump's criminal justice reform law fixed many of the disparities Biden created and made our system more fair and just for all Americans. Joe Biden also failed our nation's historically black colleges and universities, heaping blame on them as they fought to ensure our young folks had access to higher education. Once again, to clean up Joe Biden's mess, President Trump signed into law historically high funding for HBCUs, as well as a bill to give them permanent funding for the first time ever. And now Joe Biden wants to come for your pocketbooks. Unless, of course, you're a blue state millionaire. I'm serious. That's one of their solutions for the pandemic. They want to take more money from your pocket and give it to Manhattan elites and Hollywood moguls so they get a tax break. Republicans, however, passed President Trump's once-in-a-generation tax reform bill that lowered taxes for single moms, working families, and those in need. So when it comes to what Joe Biden says he'll do, look at his actions. Look at his policies. Look at what he already did and what he didn't do while he's been in Washington for 47 years. Ladies and gentlemen, people don't always see those failures because they think we're having a policy debate on two sides of an issue. That is not what is happening. Our side is working on policy while Joe Biden's radical Democrats are trying to permanently transform what it means to be an American. Make no mistake, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want a cultural revolution, a fundamentally different America. If we let them, they will turn our country into a socialist utopia. And history has taught us that path only leads to pain and misery, especially for hardworking people hoping to rise. Instead, we must focus on the promise of the American journey. I know that journey well. My grandfather's 99th birthday would have been tomorrow. Growing up, he had to cross the street if a white person was coming. He suffered the indignity of being forced out of school as a third grader to pick cotton, and he never learned to read or write. Yet, he lived long enough to see his grandson become the first African American to be elected to both the United States House and the United States Senate in the history of this country. Our family went from cotton to Congress in one lifetime. And that's why I believe the next American century can be better than the last. There are millions of families just like mine all across this nation, full of potential, seeking to live the American dream. And I'm here tonight to tell you that supporting the Republican ticket gives you the best chance of making that dream a reality. God bless you. And Father, please continue blessing the United States of America. God bless.
Just magnificent, Mr. Scott. And with that, we await night 2 to see if the Republicans can keep this steam going. But for now, that's all the time we have. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for night 2, where we'll see former Planned Parenthood Director Abby Johnson, Rand Paul, Mike Pompeo, Don Jr. speaks again, Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, and even Tiffany Trump, as well as my new favorite youngster, Nicholas Sandmann. I can't wait for that. And it should end with the First Lady, Melania Trump. Make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until tomorrow night, good night, and God bless.